Hello, I'm Steve Fleming. Welcome to my studio. Tonight's video we're going to do a nice little description about using these small little rigger brushes, which I talk about in my blog, and we're going to show how we use those to create skeletal types of trees and how we vary the tension against the paper. And I think it'll be a nice informative lesson. Plus we're going to do a little bit of a talk on sequential washes, which are also much easier to understand if I show them in person as opposed to just put them on my blog. So come along and we'll paint up this video. So I talk a lot in my blog about using the side of a brush, and I talk about these little bitty brushes that I'm going to show you today, which I think are really nice. These are not to, what would you say, endorse people's products, but I will tell you that these little Scripps liner brushes are ones that I use in my talk about in my blog. They're Scripps liners from Silver Brush Company Black Velvet line. I use a number 4, I use a number 8, and then I use riggers. And what these do, they allow me to paint trees. And the problem most people have when they use these little skinny brushes is that they use the point of the brush and they pull the mark up, and it doesn't really do what I'm talking about in this particular situation. So these brushes, when used well and used with all the edges you can possibly get out of them, can do some really marvelous things in terms of the painting of things like objects like trees. This is a little bitty small rigger brush, and it makes this mark there, and most people would say, well, that's not a very interesting looking tree, but the fact is that if you push it into the paper, really push it in hard and pull it up, it starts getting a little bit nicer. And then make sure you have enough paint on your brush. Get it nice and dark. And really vary the pressure and the angle, and you can begin to get really nice looking tree marks with this brush. And I'll introduce the other ones in just a second, but if you see what happens, you pull it off the paper, you sort of herky-jerky it across like that, and you get a really nice feeling of brush marks for trees. Now that is a really small little brush, and I use this number, I guess this is probably about a number 3 or number 4 rigger, and I use these a lot for background trees, but I also sometimes use them for forward trees. Then this is the Scripps liner number 4, which I talk a lot about, and I'll use the same type of a thing that I was just doing, but I'm going to show you that if I push this into the paper really hard, I get a really nice mark, and then it goes out to a really fine mark, and it allows me to create really nice, delicate, exciting brushwork for details like tree trunks and that type of thing. So when you're using this type of a brush, lay the brush right down on the side, pull it right in front of the other trees, and you'll start seeing that this tree really comes alive based on how you handle the brush. I push the brush really onto the surface of the paper on its side, like this, and then I pull it up to the point, and it makes an absolutely fabulous, fabulous tree mark. And as this is a number 4, which is exactly what the first little rigger was, which was a little number 4, skinny little haired brush. This is a number 8, a number 8 Scripps liner, which you can get a really big tree trunk. Push it into the paper, pull it in like that, pull it over, and you start seeing that these 3 or 4 brushes really do a magnificent job at creating layers of trees and interesting brush marks. And if you just pull it off the paper, you will find that as you pull it off the paper, you get a nice fine mark.
You have to go right then.
Why?
His mom is here. Hello. How can I help you get this inside quickly?
Just leave it out there, we'll bring it in.
limited battery life here, so.
You have to go see our mailbox. Okay.
What happened?
The door's locked.
Door doesn't open? It's broken?
You're good.
When you use these bigger scripts liner, and this is a number 8, and you put down that first little mark, then what I do is I come back with a little bit of a darker value on the side that's in shadow, and I will put a little bit of darkness on this side, creating a feeling that the light's coming from here. So I get a nice feeling of light coming from this direction. I hardly ever will stop a tree at the ground like it's just fallen on the planet from something. And I almost always try to attach it to the ground with a little bit of brushwork, so I make sure that the tree trunk sits in to the ground. And if you get used to using these brushes, they are so much more interesting of a brush mark than the traditional round brush, which I use a lot. But it gives you a whole lot more brush marks than this one does. Although this is a nice brush and you get a lot of nice things going on, you don't get quite the same feeling of excitement and texture that you get with the long-haired brush, because as you're dragging this across the paper, it's skipping across the dimples of the paper, creating a really nice type of atmospheric effect. Because the more texture you get in the upper areas of the tree branches, the more you get the sort of feeling that it's in the sky. And that's kind of what you're looking for when you're painting. So another thing we talked about is the idea of having layers of color in your background washes. I've talked about this a little bit, where you'll have a passage of trees or something back here in the horizon, and I put down a color. And again, when I wet the paper and I'm using a round brush, I'm almost always going to be painting with the side of my brush. So I usually start with a cooler wash in the background, and I immediately run sequential washes towards the front. So I flick the brush into a trash can. I run something in the background. I put in a little bit of cool wash. This is a little bit of ultramarine blue. Bring a little bit of cool there. Then immediately I come back on top of it with a little stronger color. This is just adding a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of olive green, a little bit more pigment. And this is going to give me a second layer. And then I'll have this, bring that down. And then I'll put another piece of color on top of this. I'll just strengthen this a little bit, add a little bit more pigment to it, make it a little bit warmer. Pull this a little bit more like that, and come right across the top. I'm not going to worry about whether or not it's wet. I'm going to keep working in a sort of sequential fashion, and by doing that I'm going to get nice edges. I'm going to get a feeling of atmosphere. I'm going to get a feeling of the landscape, because the landscape definitely has a tendency to lose a little bit of edge as it gets further away. And I get this really nice effect of cool, a little less cool, a little warmer, and then I can put really thick pigment right on top of this, creating the feeling of something that's right in front of it, like that. And then, as always, I make sure that I take whatever plane is coming this way, and I try to attach that just a little bit with a wash that's this way. So this then has a transition between the vertical and the horizontal, and it comes this way, creating a nice feeling that that's sitting up in the horizon and this is the landscape coming forward. And if you do that, then you'll start having really nice, interesting landscapes by just using the side of your brush to pull the color as opposed to the point of your brush, which creates too many marks. You don't want a lot of marks in this. And then if you put these trees in front of this, then you would have a really complete looking winter sort of landscape. And if you were using a knife or something like that, you could easily come from here and scrape up and get a nice feeling of these trees right in front of this. And it gives you an opportunity to paint everything while it's damp. Don't be afraid to do that. Just control the amount of water you bring back to the paper. And you'll find that you will be able to come back now and create a really interesting looking landscape using this type of a brush mark on top of this type of an application of paint. Alright, I'm going to try to incorporate what we were just talking about with using the rigger brush and the scripts liner and the layered colors behind this painting, which I'm about halfway through. And the reason I'm doing it this way is it allows you to see the process of how I would paint this type of piece of work. And so I'm going to put in a wash in the back using a nice cool sort of gray tone using ultramarine blue and burnt sienna with a little bit of cobalt violet. And I'm going to establish that background color back here. I'm going to put this in just like I was doing in the last little area we were talking about. This is a nice piece of blue. And try to get a nice texture on the edge. There's a little more burnt sienna. Pull this over here. Make sure when you come down you cut around the roof because it's there. You drew it. Think about it. You've already got that going, so I'm going to go right ahead and leave it. Come down here, cut around this, cut around this. And leave a little bit of light at the bottom. And then I'm going to take a little bit of olive green, pull that into this. But I don't want this to be too green because I want this to feel like it's more of a winter painting. So I don't want to add a whole lot of bright green to it or else it's going to feel like it's Where Are the Leaves. So here's a little bit more color. I'm not going to let anything dry. A little bit more cobalt violet here. Cobalt violet and this olive green can make a sort of nasty color if you're not watching yourself. I'll make sure that you don't get too crazy. And then come back into here, down to here. Leave a little bit of the other color showing through. Keep painting with the side of your brush. I'm going to leave this little bit of light here. I can see these little cows that are drawn in. And when I put in this, it really makes the roofs come alive on the building and you begin to see the buildings which you could not really see before. And then I don't worry at all about any sorts of bleeds. If I got lucky and got a few bleeds to happen, I'd be kind of happy about that actually. Because I find that sometimes the accidentals in these areas are nice. Occasionally it drives people crazy. They go, oh my gosh, what am I going to do with that little bleed area? And I go, well, that's actually pretty cool. So, don't be afraid of them. Now this is a little bit more of a grayish dark. Try not to rub the paint too much. If you rub the paint, you're going to lift the color and then you'll have a lot of white and it won't be quite what you were thinking it was going to be. You want this to be a nice, interesting color. Leave a little of the green coming through. Don't completely cover everything. Come right up here. Leave a little of that green. Take a little bit of blue. Pull it up here like this. Pull across the top, give yourself a little bit of texture. A little bit of texture. So there's a little bit more interest at this top edge of the shape. Watch that this doesn't bleed down across the top of this roof. And if it starts to do that, just take a paper towel and blot it back just a little bit. There you go. So that's the background piece. Now, To follow up on the tree idea that we had before, I'm going to take a little bit of a knife and I'm going to scrape a few little highlights out of this where the tree passes in front of these dark areas. And remember, you're doing this to see where the tree is. I'm really not doing this because I'm going to leave these light. I want to have a nice color relationship against the background, but I'm not really doing this because these are going to be left as white places in the painting. This is where I want to be able to see the color of the tree going in front of the background. And if you get comfortable with those brushes, you can do some really nice, elegant looking trees. And these, of course, are winter trees, so there's no leaves on them. But this is an absolutely good starting point for people who are struggling with trees. Start when the winter is around, because you can paint the trees without leaves and you can get much more comfortable with the sort of structure of the tree, which is occasionally sort of baffling to people because they don't really paint them without the leaves on them, and they don't look at the fact that the tree's bigger at the bottom, skinnier at the top, and they have a nice sort of elegant composition, and you really want to get used to doing that. Looking at your trees as being a really nice, interesting thing in your painting. So now I'm going to take the skinny little brush. This is actually the Scripps liner, the number 4. I'm going to mix up a color that's burnt sienna, mostly, with a little bit of blue. And I want it to read against this gray color as sort of a powerful color. Got enough water to make it go across. And I'm going to flick the brush, get rid of some of the color. I'm going to come right across this and let it run back into that particular area where the background's still damp. And I'm going to run across here and do a few of these for you and show you how I paint this. And I really would like it to be damp. It sort of bothers me when I lose the dampness, because then I don't have, it's too hard edged in front of the trees, the background trees. I want to have it be merged. And see how the brush goes right out to a nice point? Run the marks quick. Don't spend all this time worrying about each mark. Pull it right in front of the house. Vary your brush marks. That's really critical. Vary the angle of the tree. Vary the angle of the tree coming up out of the ground. Not every tree is straight. Some trees actually are leaning over, just about ready to fall. Try not to create a goalpost effect, which is a sort of even spacing of everything, or a sort of wishbone effect, which is not all that much more interesting. So then these trees are closer. A lot of water. It's okay. Not worried about it. Make this one pretty big. A little more burnt sienna. Lay the brush down like I talked about. Get a nice fat mark. Pull it in front of this other trees. Gives you a little bit of perspective. And I use this sort of herky-jerky motion sometimes, which I think is helpful to the brush mark, where it sort of bounces across the paper. Darken up a little bit. Create some nice marks. And then just come back and take a flat brush, or you could use a round brush, but I'm just saying a flat brush. Flat brush, and just sort of tie these in a little bit like this. So now you have this nice feeling of these trees, and I'm going to go ahead and put a little bit of a indication of some sort of rock form or something down here on this left, because I think the ground's got to have something on it. So I'll just pull this down like this. and then do a really quick scrape. And just like that, you sort of scrape off a little bit of the light on the top of it. Sort of says there's a couple rocks in the middle of this field. Pull something up like a couple little random pieces of weed. Come back and put some of these there, and you'll start seeing that it works much better this way. So that's really all I wanted to do. I wanted to talk about how to paint those trees and how to put them onto the painting, and then put that nice little backdrop in that in the painting. And I think if you can remember that application of paint for that background and then scrape these trees out and get used to the skinny little brushes, you'll be much more successful painting the trees. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like me on Facebook at facebook.com/Steve Fleming Artist. Also, on my blog every day I'm going to be posting new lessons and new demonstrations. Like me, share my stuff, let me know what you think, and give me suggestions and your comments about what you might like me to do. Thanks.